Welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat podcast. I am your host, Andy Storch, and I'm excited that you are joining me today for another great episode and conversation to help you up your game and improve your capabilities in the world of talent development. And today we're talking about culture and developing leaders, and we have a fantastic guest who knows a lot about those things. Garry Ridge is a leader, coach, and passionate advocate for workplace cultures that foster belonging, learning, and success. As CEO and chairman of WD40 Company for 25 years, he built one of the world's most recognized brands by prioritizing trust, respect, and people-centric leadership. And now, as the culture coach, Garry helps leaders create workplaces where people feel valued and inspired. Through the learning moment, he partners with executives to build cultures of collaboration and purpose-driven performances. And he also serves on the boards of the Gorilla Glue Company and East Ridge Workforce Solutions. Garry co-authored Helping People Win at Work with Ken Blanchard a while back, and now is the author of the new best-selling book, Any Dumbass Can Do It, which is a USA Today bestseller and a book with a fantastic title that's going to catch your attention if you're in the bookstore. It also reinforces his belief that great leadership is simple, but not easy. Garry is known as the Dean of Dumbassery, and Garry champions learning moments, encouraging leaders to turn mistakes into growth opportunities. And his core philosophy is when people feel safe, valued, and connected, they do their best work and go home happy, strengthening families, communities, and the world. And I also want to mention that Garry was a guest on this podcast back on episode 205, which was on building a culture of engagement and belonging, which came out in January of 2021. So we are getting together about 4.5 years hence, I guess, as they would say in some places. Garry, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, Andy. And I think you'll see that even after 4.5 years, I still can't grow hair on my head. So, uh,
That is true. I don't know what you tried to do, but there's definitely nothing there. I remember our last conversation so fondly, really digging into your philosophy on culture at WD40 and in other organizations. I couldn't believe that it's been more than 4 years since the last time we talked, but I was really pleasantly surprised to see you come out with this book when you reached out about coming on the podcast. And I said, of course, I'd be happy to have you back on. I want to start with something you mentioned at the end of your bio there, which is the core philosophy of when people feel safe, valued, and connected, they do their best work. I wonder if you could talk about the importance of that and how you implemented that while you were at WD-40.
yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it really goes back to a point that we're pretty slow learners because in 384 BC, Aristotle was born. And Aristotle said, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And really, when you think about it, that's kind of like an old duh statement. Of course, if people really enjoy what they're doing, they're going to do better work. So, our role as leaders is to create that environment. And there's a few things that need to be in place for that to happen. And they're simple things. They're not easy, but they're simple. Number one is, do you create an environment where people know and feel like they belong because of the behaviors of those that lead them? Do you create an environment where people know and feel like they matter and that their work makes a difference because they're being recognized? Do you have a set of values in an organization that protect people and set them free? And then as an organization, are you acting as a coach to the people you have the privilege to lead, not a manager, because you manage your bank account, you don't manage people, you coach people into their best self.
Hmm.
And then finally, are you reducing fear by replacing failure with learning? I talk a lot about a learning moment, which is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that needs to be openly and freely shared with all people. So those are the simple pillars, if you will. And that's why I say that if you understand those pillars and you put systems and behavioral guidelines in place in your organization, any dumbass can build a great culture.
It does seem that way. I mean, what you're talking about is the essential formula for, I think, of psychological safety, but also engagement and helping people do their best work. It's one of those things that's easier said than done, right? A lot of people listening are nodding along, saying, like, yes, we want our people to feel safe. Yes, we want them to feel engaged and passionate about the work they're doing. We want them to feel like their work matters. a lot of that comes down to the leaders they work for, right? Not the managers, as you said. You manage. What did you say we manage?
We manage your bank account and
Ah,
inventory. You coach people.
okay. So a lot of it comes down to the leaders that people are reporting into and that relationship. So how do you think about making sure that leaders are on board with this philosophy?
Well, I think at firstly it gets around to awareness. So, in the coaching work that I do now, and I coach currently about 8 CEOs of public and private companies, a lot of leaders are not aware of the impact of their behavior.
Mm,
And when you make them aware of it, in a lot of cases, you kind of get oh, really? So I think the first step is, are you aware of your leadership behavior? Do you act and do you lead in a way that encourages people and brings out the best of them? Or are you acting like this person? I think I introduced you to this person once before, but this is Alec, or it could be Alice, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated,
ooh,
who has a number of undesirable leadership behaviors, a lot of which he or she doesn't know about, that create these toxic cultures where people don't feel they belong, matter, et cetera, et cetera.
right. Well, let's go through some of those. What are some of those most common fear-inducing behaviors? Because we have listeners who are leaders or managers, but also a lot of people working in talent development who are working with leaders and could probably identify some of those and see where there's opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the soul-sucking leader or the soul-sucking CEO has a big ego. Their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego.
Mm,
They're a micromanager. They want to be involved in everything. When I talk about a great coach, Andy, if you think about a great coach, and I know you're a sports fan and and whatever, and particularly where you're living now, soccer's or
yes.
football as they call it, is
Football
huge.
mecca. Yeah.
Yeah. But, if you're watching a great football game, you never ever see the coach run on the field and steal the ball.
Right.
You never ever see the coach run to the podium and kick the player off the podium and take the prize. The great coach is spending time on the sideline observing the play with only one objective, and that's to help inform the player of the best game to play. And a great coach is spending a lot of time in the stinky locker room. And that's where they're building that trust in the team, where a soul sucking leader is a micromanager. They're running on the field, they're taking the ball, they're not spending time developing their person. The soul sucking leader also thinks they're corporate royalty. They don't want to spend a lot of time in the locker room
Mm,
where they need to. They tend to like a fear-based culture instead of a learning culture. They love to control things. They're a know-it-all. They think they have all the answers, even the wrong ones, and that's where dumbassery comes in, because dumbassery is your superpower. They do not necessarily value learning to the extent they should.
mhm,
They must always be right. They hate feedback. Oh my goodness, don't you
mm.
dare give me feedback. And sometimes they don't keep their commitments. And all of these behaviors are evident in some leaders. They're just not aware of how negatively they impact those that they're
Right.
trying to develop.
Yeah, I have observed, and I've run through a lot of. Let me start over. I've run a lot of leadership development programs, and one thing I've noticed is not necessarily that a lot of leaders feel like they have to be right or that they have all the answers, but that they feel like they have to have the answers, right? That people are looking at them for the answer, and so if they don't have it, then they're inadequate as a leader. Instead of thinking, I'm here to bring in the best people who have the answers and just to enable them to succeed, right?
It's amazing, when I had the privilege to lead WD40, more, often I would, introduce myself or talk about myself as, G'day, I'm Garry Ridge. I'm the consciously incompetent, probably wrong and roughly right chairman and CEO of WD-40 company, and I need all the help I can get. And it's
Mm,
amazing what happens when you, in a sincere way, with authenticity, ask for help. particularly from those that, are within your team or whoever. So
Yeah.
that's why I keep saying dumbassery is your superpower.
Why do you think it's so hard for most leaders to lean into that? Is it because they feel like the value that they bring is in the knowledge they have rather than the other factors in leadership?
It's really hard when you think about it.
Yeah.
You're put in the role as a CEO, and you think people think that you must have the answers, and you
Right.
think you must have the answers.
Right.
And so it's really hard. I mean, I remember, early on in my career, and I just moved to the United States from Australia. I wasn't CEO of WD-40, although I'd been with the company at that stage, about 8 or 10 years when I moved to the US. And I was in a meeting one day, and there was someone giving a presentation about a particular subject, and someone from an outside consulting firm. And I'm sitting in the meeting, and about 10 minutes in, I'm thinking, I have no clue what you're talking about.
Yeah.
This person was camouflaging the issue with confusion to make out how smart they were. And anyhow, I got a little frustrated and I put my hand up and I said, excuse me, sorry, not long in this country. I really am struggling to understand what you're talking about.
Hmm.
And guess what, Andy? Everybody in the room went, oh,
Yeah. Me too.
me too.
Yeah.
So I think, I've often said the three most powerful words that I think I ever learned as a leader were I don't know.
Hmm.
And the other side too is, if you're leading a company with a board of directors, sometimes you'll go into those meetings and you'll think, if I admit that I don't know to this, board of directors, am I going to get fired?
Hmm.
Where, going in and saying, look, I really don't have the answers to this yet, but I tell you what, we're going to find out and we're going to do our best to find the best result, but we just aren't there yet. And I think that gains respect. That doesn't gain, a thought that people, that you're incompetent.
Right. And what you're talking a lot about CEOs. In a large organization, you also have, VPs and directors and a lot of middle managers who are often taking cues from the C-suite, right? The leaders that they report into, right? So did you think about, when you were in that position, do you talk with your board, or your C-suite rather, to talk about the example that you're setting for the other leaders, and I almost said managers, the other leaders in the organization?
Of course. I mean, the fish rots from the head, Andy. So, you've got to, I used to say to my leadership team, be under no misunderstanding. The only reason we survive and we're here is to help those we have the privilege to lead step into a better version of themselves, and that we don't have to have all the answers. Um, and we do need to make sure we bring out the best of others because they probably have more insight into some of the things that we're trying to solve than we do.
So your book is, from what I can tell, going through it, built on two principles. Creating a great workplace culture isn't rocket science, right? This is something it's rather simple, about humility, love, forgiveness, and learning. And the ideal of being a leader who supports those values, actually being on a journey to become a better leader, not just born a great leader, right? And so this may be, where am I trying to go with this? This might be great for our talent development listeners to be thinking about. Most leaders are on a journey, right? They're not just born great leaders from the beginning. I think a lot of times we promote people and expect that they're going to know how to lead others. So, how can we set people up for success when they move into leadership roles?
Well, I often say that, I even say now, I just completed my 25-year apprenticeship in leadership. I need to put it to work.
Yeah.
Um, but, I think that everybody is on a continual leadership learning journey. So, interestingly enough, as we put people into leadership roles, not many organizations actually teach them the fundamentals of leadership.
Mm.
That's one of the things that we did at WD-40 Company is, we talked about the fundamentals of leadership. What is it to be a leader? Why are you here? What does a good coach look like? How do you do, what's good coaching? And so I think again, we sometimes make that fatal error of saying, well, here's someone who's done really well in a role. Now we're going to put them into role to lead people.
Mhm.
And what we need to do is help them understand the responsibilities of, you know, being a leader are a little different from the role they came from, and help them, think about the aspects of what makes a good leader. Good leaders love and involve their people. They're always in servant leadership mode. They're expected to be competent, so they are continually on that learning path. They have emotional intelligence. They're connected. They spend time in the locker room. They love learning moments. They have a heart of gold, but they also have a backbone of steel. A lot of people think that great leadership or building great cultures is about pizza, popcorn, and margarita parties. It's not. It's a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted, having
Mhm.
a heart of gold and a backbone of steel. So we've got to, share with our leaders there are times when you are going to make and have to make the decision because that's your role.
Mhm.
But you need to understand that. We great leaders are champions of hope. They're always looking. They know that micromanagement is not scalable. How many leaders have we coached into new roles and really coaching them that it's not your job to do the job of people you
Right.
lead. It's
Right.
your job to teach the people that you lead to do
Yeah.
their job better.
Yeah.
They do what they say they're going to do. And I guess one of the big things is as you come in as a leader, be coached about asking for feedback, not rejecting it.
Mhm. Yeah, and I've heard and found that as people move, quote, higher on the ladder, if you will, move up into more senior leadership, they're less and less likely to get the feedback they need to be able to improve, right? And so what you're talking about is seeking out and asking for that feedback so that you can get better, recognizing you're on a journey, not you're at a destination.
Absolutely. It's so true. And the one thing that, leaders, as they gain more responsibility of the people they lead, is when they receive feedback, is to only say two words, thank you.
Mm.
Because people, are going to feel afraid if as soon as you share some feedback, you start rebutting them and, explaining it to them why their point of view is so off course.
Yeah. I've run many leadership development programs myself, and I often ask people what are the best qualities and the worst qualities in leaders to think back of leaders they've worked with and what are the things that they've loved and things they've hated. And when I ask people about the worst things that leaders do, the number one most common thing that comes up again and again is micromanaging. Right? It's something you mentioned a little bit ago. And we know the best leaders don't do this. And yet so many leaders are still, or managers, right, are still micromanaging their people. And I've often thought that that's mostly driven by fear and ego. Would you agree? Or like why, how do you help people stop micromanaging?
Well, yes. And the other thing, those that micromanage will always tell you how they have too much to do
Mm-hmm.
because they're trying to do everybody else's job. I'm so busy because.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it is. It's a fear. The other thing is that, instead of micromanaging, you become a teacher. And if you spend your time teaching your team to play their best game, you're not going to have to run on the field to micromanage them.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing around micromanagement too is I think it also does have some basis of accountability around it because a lot of leaders are very, very vague on what we're holding each other accountable for. And, in the book that I wrote with Ken some years ago, we talked about, are we clear about what getting an A looks like in our organization? The book was, don't mark my paper, help me get an A.
Mm-hmm.
And I found in a lot of organizations, people aren't clear around what that A looks like. So, as a coach, you would spend time saying, this is what an A looks like. This is what it takes to win. You and I are going to work towards that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to play the game for you, but I will, identify opportunities for you to get closer to that A, but it's up to you to get it.
I love that. And that's right in line with what you were talking about with coaching and teaching. I think coaching is something that is becoming more and more um, accessible, and a lot of organizations are investing in bringing in coaches or coaching at scale. But what I'm hearing you talk about is leaders actually coaching their people. And so there's a lot of importance there in helping leaders understand how do you coach your people so that they can keep getting better. And therefore, you're both going to achieve more success.
Oh, absolutely. And to be deliberate about it, Andy, we took the word manager out of our organization.
Mm,
If you reported to me, I was your coach, and you would refer to me as your coach.
mm,
We would have conversations. Oh, I need to go and check with my coach on that, or let's instead of I'm going to get my manager's approval,
yeah.
you would hear people say, I'm going to go check in with the coach on that and just see what their point of view is. So
Mm,
we absolutely took the word manager out. Everybody was called a coach. You had a first coach and a second coach. The first coach was your direct person you reported to. The second coach was their next level up. So,
mm.
there was always two of us that we could play around. But that was, and once it's interesting how people behave when you label them correctly.
Yeah, I was going to ask at what point did you do that? And did you notice a big difference just with the language shift? I'm sure there was a lot of uh, development or coaching that came with it, but I'm curious what the change was.
Absolutely. And interestingly enough, in our employee opinion surveys, 97% of our global employee base said that they respected their coach. And when we asked them, why do you respect their coach? The answer was very clear. It's because the coach is always trying to help me win. Now, most
Mm,
people leave jobs because they hate their manager. And
right.
and let's role play for just a minute. I
Okay.
love this.
Okay.
Andy, it's your first day of work, right?
Yep.
I'm meeting you. G'day, Andy. I'm
Hey,
Garry.
hey, Gary,
I'm
thanks so much. I'm excited to be here.
I'm your manager.
Okay.
I'm going to manage you. How do you feel about that?
Um, I'm a little nervous. I don't know exactly what that means, and but maybe I feel secure that you're going to make sure I do things the right way. I don't know.
Okay, let's swap. G'day,
Okay.
Andy. Well, welcome aboard.
Hey, Gary, great to have you here. I'm Andy. I'm going to be your coach in the organization. How are you doing?
Good. So, what are you going to do as a coach?
Well, I am going to look out for you, make sure that you have the resources you need to be successful. And of course, I'm going to give you coaching and advice along the way.
Oh, wow. So you're here to help me win, right?
Absolutely. I'm here to help you win and the whole entire organization win.
Oh, wow. I'm excited. Thank you so much. It's great to be here and be have someone who's really my coach, not someone who's trying to manage me.
Right. I love that. There's definitely a big difference there in how you think about it, especially when you meet that person and their demeanor. But just the title, I'm definitely a big advocate of sort of thinking about the words that we use and how they can impact our mindset.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. The other thing that's really cool about that is, I was the coach to many people, and that also gave me, with my direct reports, an on-road to have a conversation where if they weren't behaving like a coach, I could say, hey, I don't see you acting as a coach for Andy.
Mm,
I don't see you thinking about his development. You don't have a very robust development plan for him. I don't see you, on the training track watching him train. Let's talk about what's going on there. So
mm.
again, it does do that. And you're
Right.
right. Words and situations are so important. I probably shared with you one other thing that was really powerful, is we create a thing called the Maniac Pledge. And there's a disease in organizations.
Mm.
It's a rampant, and it's called the na disease, the finger pointing disease. People are
Yeah.
pointing fingers at each other. And we said, okay, the reason they're pointing fingers is we need to give them a statement that puts the responsibility that creates this behavior on their shoulders. So we created the Maniac Pledge.
Mm.
And the Maniac Pledge says, I am responsible for taking action, asking questions, and getting answers, and making decisions. I won't wait for someone to tell me. If I need to know, I am responsible for asking. I have no right to be offended that I didn't get this sooner. And if I'm doing something others should know about, I'm responsible for telling them.
Mm.
So we embedded the Maniac Pledge into the fabric of our culture, which now took away the excuse of na. If someone came to you and says, there's something's going on in the company and I don't know about it, we'll say, well, Why didn't you ask?
Why didn't you ask? Yeah.
You don't wait to tell me you didn't know. Go find out for yourself, or you're responsible. And it's
Right.
one of the most powerful things we had in the company. I think our values, our maniac pledge, our coaching, and the learning moment, which was, the reducing failure into learning, was probably four of the very most powerful things, apart from our purpose.
Yeah, I love all those, especially that last one, which plays well into the idea of developing a growth mindset and being willing to try different things and celebrating failure, or at least not punishing it, so people are willing to try things, right? And you end up, I would imagine, seeing more creativity and innovation as a result.
Well, exactly. Every outcome is when you look at it, every outcome is the result of learning.
Mm.
Go back to the beginning of the company itself, WD-40 company. In 1953 in San Diego, there was this little fledgling company called Rocket Chemical Company. And there was a problem with condensation and corrosion in the umbilical cord of the Atlas space rocket. So these couple of chemists got together and started to mix formulations to solve the problems for this space rocket.
Hmm.
There were Formula One didn't work, five didn't work, 15 didn't work, 27 didn't work, 38 didn't work, 39 didn't work. But guess what? 40 worked. And that's why it's called WD, water displacement 40th formula. So
Mm.
the company is the result of 39 learning moments.
Hmm. And there's the world history is full of, famous inventors who spent years trying lots of different things that didn't work until they got to the things that did. So I love that. I wanted to come back to leaders as coaches. I really love that idea as well. And when everybody thinks of themselves as coaches, they're really focused on enabling and empowering and coaching people to succeed. One of the things I hear a lot in organizations where leaders aren't doing this is because the leaders are afraid of losing their best people, right? Of, oh, if I develop this person, coach them to be successful, they're going to go take another job or they'll surpass me, which of course is more of a scarcity mindset, but it's still one that so many leaders have in organizations, especially I think this day and age where resources are constrained and a lot of people are afraid if I coach this person to move on to something else, I may not get a chance to replace them. How can we help our leaders shift their mindset on that so that they're thinking entirely about coaching and developing and not worrying as much about, oh, what will happen if that person moves on to something else?
So I would ask this question. Do you want a mediocre job for a long period of time, or do you want a superstar job for a fill in the bank period of time? And you know what? If that person moves on to a better life, congratulations. You've just done what you should be as a human being, which is helping people
Mm.
step into a better and best version of themselves. Now, interestingly enough, we had very, very, very low turnover because as we grew and as the company did better, great opportunities became. Yeah, we lost some people from time to time, but the culture was so important too. So again, yeah, you may lose people, but I tell you what, you'll lose more people leaving you because they hate working for you than you will because you've developed them. You know,
Mm.
back in during COVID, everyone was talking about the Great Resignation. I wrote an article on LinkedIn. I called it the Great Escape. People were escaping toxic cultures. They said,
Hmm.
"I just cannot do this anymore. I've had enough."
Yeah.
So, if you're worried about losing people because you're developing them, I guarantee you'll lose more people because you don't develop them because they hate working where they work and they're looking to escape to a better place.
Amen. I agree 100%. In fact, latest McKinsey study shows, I've mentioned this on the podcast before, the number one reason people leave jobs now is a lack of perceived career growth. And if they don't feel like they're getting coaching, they're not getting growth in their job, then they're going to be looking for what's that next thing that I can do instead.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh, Garry, we've been talking a lot about all these great things that you implemented in the organization while you were there, but you are the dean of dumbassery. So I'd be curious, what are some mistakes you made, some important learning moments that you had throughout your journey?
Oh, well, we'll be here for about a day and a half, non-stop talking about that. I've had many learning moments, but I think there are a few. Number one is, early on, I remember a time when someone walked into my office and they kind of laid an issue on the table to me, and I went into problem-solving mode instead of serious listening mode. So I think, again, be aware of the fact that as a leader, sometimes you've got to suffer from bleeding tongue syndrome, which is shut up and listen and wait,
Yeah.
which is important. I had to learn that lesson. And then, I think also, making sure that you really do understand that your role as a leader is to engage with the people. And I guess, for many, many, many months and probably years, I used to walk around with praise someone written on the palm of my hand.
Mm,
Um, and again, we get to the point where we want to remind ourselves. I have this little notebook that I carry around,
okay.
um, and I've been carrying it around for years. And there's a little plaque on it. It says, "Am I being the person I want to be right now?"
Mm,
And then it says, "Who is that person?" And it says, I want to be grateful, caring, empathetic, reasonable, a listener, fact based, have a balanced opinion, be curious, be a learner, and throw sunshine, not a shadow. Now, why do I have that on there? Is because I have no right to take my leftovers to anybody. And, we can get in situations and meetings and, we'll kind of exhaust ourselves from what we're thinking, and we may have stuff going on in our head, and you know what life's like. We're just these basic human beings bumbling our way down this pathway of life, and we have these emotions that drag us off into the bushes and make us tired. So, I think that one of the things I learned is as leaders, we need to center ourselves and make sure we're not taking our leftovers to the next person, because that person does not deserve our leftovers. They
mm,
deserve our full self. So, I used to read this so often. I'd go out of one meeting into another, go, okay, right, center myself, because, the next person I'm going to interact with deserves my full person,
mm,
not what I'm left over because of what I've just been through. So that was another big learning for me as a leader, as a person. Take time to center,
mm.
and be deliberate about it, and ask yourself the question: Am I being the person I want to be right now? And who is that person? And then live that.
Yeah, I think self-awareness is so important in leadership, really getting to know yourself. But I love that question, just coming back to yourself from time to time and asking, am I living in alignment with my values? Am I showing up as the leader I want to be in? Something I remember learning years ago, I think from our mutual friend Liz Weissman and her content
Mm.
multipliers, was that most diminishers, she would call them, most, we'll say bad leaders, don't show up with the intent of diminishing their people. They just don't know that they're showing up that way. They don't know that what they're doing is harmful and causing so much stress. And if they were able to raise more, get more awareness on that, they'd probably change.
Exactly what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast.
Yeah.
Why is Al the soul sucking CEO or Alice the soul sucking leader? Because they're unaware of
Yeah.
how their behavior is impacting those they have the privilege to lead. And
Yeah.
as I said, once we make them aware of it, it's like, oh, I didn't realize that.
Mm.
One of the people that I have a great deal of respect for is my friend Dr. Marshall Goldsmith, and one of the greatest coaches in the world. And
Yeah.
I've known Marshall for many years, and his book "What Got You Here Won't Get You There" is just a wonderful read. I use it in my coaching practice of looking at these 20 or 21 habits that he's identified in his 4 decades of coaching, of being prevalent in people's leadership style that they're unaware of.
Yeah. I think we were originally connected by Dr. Marshall Goldsmith back in 2020. Not that I have quite the relationship that you probably do with him, but we did an interview a while back and he said, you really need to talk to Garry Ridge.
Uh-huh.
And here we are. I was also thinking when you were talking about someone coming to your office with a problem and you jumping right to solutions, of our other mutual friend and your fellow Aussie, Michael Bungay Stanier, who calls that the advice monster, right?
The advice monster. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The advice monster.
Right.
Yeah,
And so
he's done
that's
some great
that's
work.
oh, absolutely. The coaching habit and the advice trap. And it gets back to what you were talking about, leaders as coach, which is to have the best interest of the people that who are reporting to you. Think about how you can help them succeed. And sometimes that means leading more with curiosity and empathy and just asking questions and helping them find the answer that they may already have in themselves.
Well, as you know, the first chapter of my book is titled "Are You Okay?" which is about you as a leader, really finding out how that person is.
Yeah. So, Garry, the world is changing really fast these days with AI reportedly taking a lot of jobs, changing a lot of jobs. A lot of leaders are trying to figure out what their place is in all of this. We have companies that went fully remote after COVID. A lot of them that are doing the RTO, return to office, many sort of in between. How do you see workplace culture evolving in the next few years or the next decade?
Well, the number one, thing I think is connection. And I think organizations that said they made a finite decision to go totally virtual during COVID were probably leaning into the wrong side of the decision-making grid. I don't think you should make any finite decisions in uncertainty, and they did that. So I think that we're moving towards certainly some degree of virtual work, but people have to come together, and because belonging is such a big part of building great cultures, so people need to come together. On the side of AI, this thing develops on a daily basis, but when I was leading the company, probably the most common piece of feedback I got was, I don't have enough time.
Mm.
And I think that AI can give people time, which will allow them to do more exciting work. So if I was leading an organization right now, I'd be, getting the team that knows how to do it together and say, I want you to find everything in the organization that is boring and redundant work, and I want AI to do that. And then I want to free all of the people from doing that to do really exciting stuff that can take us to the future. Because by doing it, I'm not going to increase any overhead, but I'm going to unleash the creativity of the human being. And
Yeah.
remember, AI would be nothing without human brains, because it all comes from what we've done before.
Right. Yeah. And it's really, I saw a great presentation at a conference last week to say that it's really not the intelligent thing that we think it is. It's really more of a predictive model, because it's just taking all of the information that we've given it and then it's
Right.
trying to predict what the next thing is that you want.
Yeah, it's just a really, really smart way of, taking all that we've learned and accelerating it to a certain place. So,
Yeah.
but I think it's really exciting. And, I think that certainly if we look at it as it freeing time to allow us to do really fun and meaningful work, that will be great. Industries are going to change, and
Yeah.
maybe they should. But
Yeah.
you know,
Could be
and
time.
really, we think about this as a time of change. I reflect back. My dad was born in 1907. My mum was born in 1914. My mum lived nearly 100 years.
Mm.
And if I think about what she went through in the world, eh, is this really a time that's so much different? I
Mm.
mean, the things that are happening are different, but World War One, World War Two, the Korean War, the invention of the motor car, someone was flying planes, the internet came, the fax machine, suddenly the cell phone,
Yeah.
okay, we look at it and say, oh, this is, well, maybe not.
Yeah. I don't know if the fax machine changed the world quite in the way AI is doing now,
No.
but certainly she saw so much technological innovation. It's just absolutely incredible. Just getting back to where, offices are shifting. I don't remember if you stayed remote after COVID or brought people back into the office, but how do you think about leaders maintaining strong cultures in increasingly remote and hybrid work environments if they don't see their people on a regular basis? How do you make sure that you're still coaching people and maintaining that culture?
Well, I think you have to have and create environments where you do bring them together. I mean, okay, maybe not as often as before. And certainly, WD-40 had and still has, I believe, offices in probably 15 or 16 countries around the world. And it's interesting that some cultures came back together a lot quicker. Where you live right now
Mhm.
in Spain, which is a very
Mhm.
relationship-driven, culture, they wanted to get back together. They were missing each other.
Mm.
The same sort of thing kind of happened in France and other places. So, but I think as leaders, we have to think about creating an environment where, Andy runs out the door this morning. He gives his wife, husband, or significant other a high five and says, I am so excited to go to fill in the blank today because we are going to fill in the blank. My challenge to leaders and coaches is, what is the fill in the blank that's going to get Andy excited?
Mm,
because you need to bring people together. So, I think that again, there'll be ways to do that. And and the other side to it, it's kind of dividing. As you mentioned earlier, I'm on the board of Gorilla Glue, a fantastic company based in Cincinnati with offices in the UK and in Europe and in Australia and China and whatever. Um, but when they have 700 people working on the factory floor making these fabulous products every day, those people cannot do that in their bathroom or lounge room.
right.
So why do people in the front office get to stay home? Is it
Mm,
creating that divide? So I think as leaders, we have to share with our people that as an organization, we need to create an opportunity for people to come into the front office to show the people that are doing the other work that we are not divided, we are united.
yeah, makes sense. Um, Garry, your book, Any Dumbass Can Do It, is out now. Anything you want to make sure people know about the book that we didn't cover in this interview so far?
Um, well, I think again, it's a reflection of my 25 years of being apprenticeship leader, and in it there's lots of stories and examples. And I wrote it because I'm challenging leaders to know that if they know the ingredients that need to be in place, they can build places where people, imagine a place where you go to work every day, you make a contribution to something bigger than yourself, you learn something new, you're protected and set free by a compelling set of values, and you go home happy. Happy people create happy families create happy communities create a happy world, and no one will argue with me that we could do with a little happier world right now. And business not only has the opportunity, but I believe a responsibility to make a positive difference to that. And the way to do that is to build a culture where people know they belong, know they matter, can make choices, cherish the learning moment, and where they're coached, not managed. And if you read the book, you'll find lots of examples of that.
Amen. We'll go out on that. The book is called Any Dumbass Can Do It: Leadership Moments from an Everyday CEO of a Multi-Billion-Dollar Company, or Everyday Apprentice, as he calls himself. Garry Ridge, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your insights, your experience, and your friendship as well. And I look forward to talking more in the future.
Thanks, Andy. Been a pleasure.